Shabbat Shalom to everyone. I have to admit that I have a lot of trouble remembering things. I would say especially these days with 3 small children, but I also had trouble before that. But we all have those things, and the pieces of text, the paintings, the songs, the melodies, the things that when we hear them the first time, they go straight into our hearts. They sit there, they live there. I always think of it like a treasure chest of these sayings, these teachings, these melodies that we hold very dearly. You don't need to hear them more than once, but we go back to them over and over again. We quote them to people as we're walking around in the world, we think of them. And so I want to spend some time this morning looking at one of those texts for me. Many of those texts happen to be pieces of Torah. I spend a lot of time learning Torah. I've been very blessed in my life. And I want to look at one of those texts together in relationship with our parasha. The meaning of the word Ekev, which is the name of our parsha this morning, is up for debate, as many things are. And some believe that it means because or as a consequence of, and it's often translated that way. So when we look at the beginning of our Torah reading, we're going to see V'haya Ekev tishme'un et hamishpatim ha'ela ushmartem v'asitem otam. So if we see, and if you obey, or because you're going to obey these rules and observe them carefully, then Adonai, God, is going to keep this covenant that God has with us and also with our ancestors. But others note, Rashi is included in this, that the literal meaning of Akev is a heel, as in the heel at the bottom of our foot, which we know from Yaakov, much earlier in the Torah, that he's holding on to the heel of his brother, so it's the same root as Akev. And if we read it this way, we could play with the verse a little bit. It's not as literal, but the verse could be read more like, if your feet take you toward my laws, bringing you toward me, then I will keep my covenant and the loving kindness, this chesed that I promised your ancestors. Walking is a major theme in our parasha this morning. 3 different times in Parashat Ekev, and 5 times altogether in the entire book of Devarim, we are told to walk in the ways of God. V'shamarta et mitzvot Adonai Elohecha lalechet bidrachav ulir'a oto. Therefore, keep the commandments of Adonai your God, lalechet bidrachav, walk in God's ways and fear God. And we have a very well-known verse. Joe spoke about it. We use it here as a base of some of the core texts of our community. Ve'ata Yisrael ma Adonai Elohecha shoel me'imach. What is it, Israel, what is it that Adonai, our God, asks of us or of you? Only this, to revere Adonai, your God, lalechet bechol derachav, to walk in all of God's ways, to love and to serve Adonai, your God, with all of your heart and all of your soul. And then even later, we'll see in the parasha, if then you faithfully keep all of the instruction that I command you by loving Adonai, your God, lalechet bechol derachav, by walking in all of God's ways and by holding fast to God, we are going to be in relationship together. Over and over, Moses repeats this charge. Love God, keep commandments, and walk in God's ways. But then you have to ask, what does it mean to walk in God's way? How do we do that? What does it actually mean? And this is where this text that I love so dearly comes in. And just to say, it's actually based on a later verse in Devarim. So it's not in direct relationship with this week's parasha, although, again, this idea of walking with God is something that we see. And as I was reading the parsha, this text just kept coming to me from that trove. It kept saying, this is where my heart is, and this is what we're going to learn together. So the rabbis in the Talmud ask the question, Mai dichtiv, Acharei Adonai Elohechem telechu. What is the meaning of the verse, after Adonai your God shall you walk? And then they continue, and they interrupt themselves. But is it actually possible for a person to follow in the divine presence? Is it something that we can really do? V'halo kvar ne'emar, ki Adonai Elohecha eish ochlahu. Hasn't it already been said, for Adonai your God is a devouring fire? They question their own question. I love the beginning of the text. The rabbis try to answer, but they interrupt themselves by saying, hold on. Don't we know that God is a devouring fire? Can we really be asked to walk in God's ways when God is a devouring fire? And some read it literally. If we get too close to a fire, we're going to get burned. We'll be consumed. But I've often thought about this slightly differently when I hold this text and have probably learned it in different places and spaces. And I think about it as the rabbis asking, wait a second. We have seen God and many forms of God in our Torah. We know sometimes God in the Torah is vengeful, is angry, and is a devouring fire. Is it that God that we are meant to emulate? Is that the God that we're supposed to follow? Is that the God that we walk after? And we're watching this kind of emulation unfold before our eyes as settler violence in the West Bank continues to rise to incredible heights. Just this past week, armed settlers, about a week ago on Shabbat, entered a Palestinian village. In the violence that followed, Israelis and Palestinians were killed, and there was retaliation. Those attacks included on Palestinian communities, had the burning of 2 mosques, and there was graffiti that was found on these mosques with words and language around revenge saying that blood is never going to be for free. Violence carried out in the name of God is not good for Israelis or Palestinians, and it is not what it means to walk in the way of God. Whether it's settler violence in the West Bank or hate-filled attacks like we've had in our own neighborhood here on Tisha B'Av, invoking God to justify violence is the very opposite of the path and the godliness that these rabbis are describing in this text, and that's what they're about to go on to say. That God, that angry, fire, consuming, vengeful God, that is not the God we are walking after. That is not. But let me tell you what we are doing when we're walking after God. The rabbis go on to say, walking in God's ways means imitating God's compassion. And they teach, just as God clothed the naked, so too you should clothe the naked. Just as God visits the sick, so too you should visit the sick. Just as God comforts mourners, so too show up at the Shiva Minyan and comfort mourners. Just as God buries the dead, so too you will bury your dead. As my teacher, Rabbi Shai Held from Hadar teaches, and I'm pretty sure I learned this text from him, and I haven't spoken to him, but I feel like it could be one of his core texts as well. He teaches, just as God is present when people are vulnerable and suffering, so should we be. He points out that the list of the different mitzvot that we can do in order to be like God moves from the vulnerable to the increasingly vulnerable. The naked can be clothed. The sick have a chance that they could be healed. Mourners cannot bring back those they love, and the dead cannot be brought back. Rav Shai continues to say, the Talmud appears to be saying these people's circumstances are frightening. Stay with them instead of fleeing. Stay with them instead of fleeing. Not only should we refrain from inflicting pain and suffering on others as this vengeful, fire-consuming God, which it feels a little bit obvious to say, and at the same time, I still feel a need that we need to remind ourselves that we do not want to be that, and we are not that. But we are called not only to not inflict this kind of pain, but we are called to move toward those who are experiencing it, whether in our own community or across the world. The Torah tells us repeatedly, do not run away from the vulnerable. Walk toward them. I know that this is hard. It's hard for many, many reasons. And I want to say, especially as we continue to carry our own wounds and our grief and our pain, and of all of those who have walked away from us in different areas of our lives, but also as a community, I would say post-October 7th, when we were most vulnerable and when we still feel vulnerable. And it's important to note that vulnerability is it's complicated. Sometimes we are both the vulnerable and we are also the ones who are inflicting the kind of suffering we don't want. It's not such a clear one or the other. And that wound is real, and it's painful for us. And it is a call to do the opposite. Bring God into the world by walking toward those who are vulnerable and not away from them. One of the ways that people are responding to this call with all of this settler violence that we're seeing is through protective presence. It's a nonviolent human rights strategy in which Israeli, international, and Palestinian activists accompany vulnerable, rural, and Bedouin communities so that they aren't attacked. It's also organizations like Protect the Harvest who are going to be helping the Palestinian farming communities during the fall, during the olive harvest, so that again, the farmers stay safe, helping to deter the violence and affirming that they are not alone. Felicia participated in a protective presence with Rabbis for Human Rights when she was in Israel over the past few weeks with Hartman, and she's going to share a little bit more about that experience as well as her entire time there during Kiddush, which I'll invite you to please join us to do. And I also know, I don't know if Judith is here, but Judith Trachtenberg was telling me that her nephew recently arrived in Israel to do the same, to take part in this sacred work, to be a protective presence. In our love for Israel, in our love for God, and in our love for humanity, even in the midst of our own grief, we are beckoned to respond to vulnerability with compassion, to condemn violence, to speak, to learn, to talk about it, and to act. We begin Parashat Ekev with the image of a heel, and our Parsha, in conversation with this text that I love so dearly, reminds us that walking in God's ways is not about putting blinders on and simply following rules, nor is it some lofty, unattainable spiritual goal to walk in God's ways, which it sounds like it could be. It's the steady practice of putting one foot in front of the other toward the vulnerable, toward our shared humanity, toward hope, with a trust that each step brings us closer. Shabbat Shalom.